man. You know what's up. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here. We're here.
There was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
We had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
The FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg making that shocking revelation this week about Facebook's suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story right before the 2020 presidential election.
Funny how that happens. Joe Concha joins us now. Joe, here's the Facebook quote to Fox News. We didn't block the New York Post story. We temporarily reduced its distribution to give fact-checking partners time to review it. For those of you who aren't familiar with Facebook, basically, they didn't allow it to come up really high on many people's timelines, so many people didn't see it. Revelations like this, Joe, beg the question, how coordinated was this suppression? Was this election interference? And how high up did it go?
Yeah, and another question, Todd, why that particular story at that particular time in October of 2020? How about the story that there were Russian bounties on U.S. troops and that Donald Trump knew about it and allowed it? Was that also fact-checked and therefore reduced in terms of distribution? No, of course not. There's a political play here, and you have to love Joe Rogan in these situations where he just was able to have Mark Zuckerberg so casually just talk about this bombshell like he was talking about a vacation he just took with the family at Disney, right? So good for Joe Rogan.
Guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics, and I'm here after dark with Dylan from IRIDA TV. We're going to have a conversation like we always do, and it's going to be great. It's going to be free thinking, innovative, and open-minded. So check me out and check. Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics. Dylan!
Tommy.
How's it going, man? It's been forever.
I'm doing excellent. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. All the revelations coming out this week. It's kind of amazing.
I don't know if I'd use the term revelations for something that's like, yeah, we already knew that. Thanks for confirming it. Confirmations, I think, would be a better term to use.
I didn't mean to do that. Basically, I think you're right. So, I have to talk. I didn't mean to do that. This is what happens when you're trying to be a producer too. But yeah, so I haven't really talked to you since basically the president got COVID twice, and he was boosted and double vaxxed, and now that we got the Hunter Biden thing, how's it been going with you politically?
Well, I got to be honest, for the last 2 months, I just closed on a business, and my focus has been really oriented toward taking care of that business. And not that I've been completely checked out, but the IRIDA TV publications for the last 2 months have been pretty scant.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. But I mean, I at least read the headlines. And I obviously picked up on the fact that Zuckerberg came out and was like, oh yeah, we just censor stuff left and right. If the FBI vaguely suggests that we might want to be aware of something, we just censor it right off. Yeah.
Did you call him Zuckerberg on purpose?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what do you expect? What do you expect an Android to do but what he's programmed?
Have you ever played the game Fallout?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean the joke is he's a synth. Like a last generation synth that they hadn't quite figured out how to make the human features look quite right yet.
I mean, The guy, I mean, but honestly, what scares me the most is the fact that he just nonchalantly told Joe Rogan as if this was okay. And then also the FBI going up to a social media platform and saying anything about anything. Isn't that like a First Amendment kind of thing? Isn't that kind of
Well,
bold?
I mean, what do the First Amendment and the FBI have in common from the get-go? I don't think a whole lot. One of the things I learned recently, and this is from listening to a guy named Razor Fist, who I find incredibly hilarious and informative. I didn't realize that the FBI was created with a stroke of the executive pen and can be erased with a stroke of the executive pen. It doesn't require an act of the legislature to put it in there or to remove it. So if some president decided, like, you know what, nah, it could go. But I mean, you know, what was the FBI originally made for? It was originally made during Prohibition in order to track down bootleggers, which, like, Prohibition was its
what it
own.
was made for real?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And
I knew it was near close to World War I when they made it, so I guess that.
and then after Prohibition went, of course, the stroke of the executive pen was supposed to say, "Hey, look at this bureaucracy that isn't serving its purpose anymore. Maybe we should just get rid of it," because that's what typically happens, right? Ha 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 ha.
Okay, so yeah, so then
So,
J. Edgar Hoover got a hold of it and turned it into something different.
And so obviously they reoriented it towards something else, and it's. I don't expect anything useful to come out of the FBI at this point. I got to be honest.
Was this okay? So you know the history, and I think it's interesting that a lot. You're not in a right or a left camp. Most like watching your streams. I was like in awe today of what you were saying about loans and banking. I agree with you on that. But then you do lean around on some things. But I think it's funny that Marjorie Taylor Greene was like, talking about defunding the FBI. Everybody
She was
seems to
also
be up in arms.
pitching about student loan forgiveness.
Yeah, what do you think about student loan forgiveness? What do you think about
I support a 100% full Jubilee style debt forgiveness. All student loans, maybe even going back 5 or 10, some amount of arbitrary units of people who've already paid them off and paying them back too. If right after that fact, you can bankrupt out of them.
You could bankrupt out of them after that? So,
yeah, so no, I mean, like, after the Jubilee happens, from that point forward, student loans are bankruptable.
Okay. So that fixes the problem after that. So that would fix the problem.
I hope it fixes the problem. There's some people who even think that the university should be punished, which I don't think is a bad idea either. But I mean, I think the conservative side has this completely ass backwards. I mean, first of all, they don't understand economics at all. Not that the left understands it either, but they misunderstand. They misunderstand different aspects of it, right? But so the student loan crisis that we're seeing is a result of the child who grows up against the student loan, goes to school. His entire life, he's told, go to school, get good grades, and you'll succeed. You should succeed in society. You graduate from high school. You're 18. Your brain is literally not fully formed yet, because your brain isn't fully formed until you're like 25, right? And then there's nobody doesn't get student aid.
No,
right?
Nobody doesn't.
You ask for it, you get it. You
unless you smoke marijuana and then you get arrested and then you don't get student aid.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. But if so you get the student aid, and then you go to college, and then when you go to college, there's no direction. There's no hey, you better go to a STEM field, otherwise all this stuff is just a joke, right? Even stuff that's traditionally academically sound, like say history or philosophy or something like that, that'll get you nowhere. And that's to say nothing about women's studies or gender studies or whatever. And so, you graduate multiple tens of thousands of dollars in debt on the low end. You get hit with an interest rate that's about 8%, which in business terms, 8% isn't that bad. But in useless terms, when you're saying, okay, I just took on an 8% load of $30,000, $40,000, and I don't have any realistic means of really assaulting the principal on this, and then turn around and say, okay, you can't bankrupt it out of it. And then it's been a while since I've seen articles like this, but I was starting to see articles in certain states where, like, they'll take your driver's license away if you get late on your student loans. This is a modern form of debt slavery.
It is. And also, they'll garnish your wages. And one time when I was just in between college, like, I thought about my student loans because I had to pay my rent. And so my student loans were enormous, and I hadn't gone back to school because I was working. And so my student loans came into effect. I was like, I can't even afford to go back to school right now because I have to keep working. So I'm just not going to pay my student loans. The instant that I decided to do that, they garnished my wages. I couldn't even. They froze my credit cards. They froze my creded cards too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, these are just more and more examples of, we will remove your ability to interact with society like everybody else if you don't pay these things, right? Yeah. So I believe, from a moral standpoint, the Jubilee is justified as a motherfucking apology. Yeah. We're sorry, most productive generation that currently exists right now, for lying to you about this bullshit.
I mean, right? I agree with you, bro.
And, you know, I was thinking about it more because there's the inflation concern, right? And I don't want to poo-poo the concept of inflation, because if the money inflates and you can't afford, you know, what you could afford the day before, that's a real issue. However, the damage has already been done if you think about how the system works, right? Because with the banking system, if I take out a loan, which is technically the wrong verbiage, if money gets created for a reason, because that's all a loan is money creation, the money gets created at that moment, and as I pay back the principal, the money actually gets destroyed. It's weird if you're not used to the idea, right? So if I borrow $100 from Bank Tommy, Bank Tommy has actually created the money out of nothing, lends me the $100. As I pay the $100 back, the principal just annihilates itself in banking ledgers. Now, Tommy gets to keep the interest, and that's his profit, right? Right. What that means is all this money that has been loaned out, or this money that has been created for these student loans, has already gone out there. Meaning, whatever inflation, or if that even causes inflation, right? Whatever that has already occurred. And if the debt gets forgiven, it's already out there. The damage has already been done. Right. I guess you could make the argument that repaying the loans is deflationary, right? To say, okay, it's removing money out of the system, but that's fucking stupid. Like, if there's a reason for not doing it, because I mean, this is, when I say the most productive generation, I mean it's generation in their their 20s and their 30s that's supposed to be out there, like, maintaining society and building civilization and stuff like that. Right. If you put them into debt slavery, they're going to be less productive. And if they're less productive, that's going to be way more inflationary than whatever money that you created. Because when you create money, but you also create goods and services, well, you don't have any inflation, because the goods and the number of things to buy went up with the amount of money to buy it. Right.
So the establishment would disagree with you, though, because they own, of course, the companies and the corporations, and then you end up going to Walmart and you spending your money, and then they have those subsidies, and then they end up getting tax breaks.
I would even say this: who fucking gives a shit if it inflates? Okay, let's say I'm completely wrong about all that stuff. Who cares if it inflates anything, right? The government. I mean, how much money has been spent in, sending weapons to Ukraine, and that so far that has probably 90% just gone into Zelensky's pocket or fucking something like that. Right?
Oh my God! You hate Ukraine.
How much money has just been shipped over there? Like, is it enough to have paid off the entire student debt at this point?
Oh my God,
right?
Bro!
So I mean, like the government is regularly spending into existence trillions of dollars on world-destroying bullshit. So do it for something productive.
I don't want to pay your loans, though. Your gender studies degree. It's always a gender studies degree with the right wing, bro. They don't like drag queens. They don't like gender studies degrees.
I don't like
get
drag
what
queens,
they're
and
really
I
doing.
don't like gender studies degrees. So I mean, I see their point on that. However, that
See, but
point
that's how they
isn't
get
nearly
people
as
like
strong
you.
as that point
Yeah.
isn't nearly as strong as you brainwashed and tricked these children into accepting debt slavery for nothing, right?
Would you rather have
So
debt slavery
it
or
would
drag
it would
shows? Stupid question. Go ahead.
what's that?
I said debt slavery or drag shows. What's worse? I don't
Depends on
know.
the type of drag show.
I know, really. That's a good answer for a straight guy. Good job, Dylan. All right. So, fucking my buttons, and you know that it's the 6-month anniversary of Ukraine. We're giving $3 billion to them. How do you? When I first saw this news, by the way, I almost cried because I don't understand. Like Putin almost has it. He's got the Donbass. He's got Kyiv. He's just taking his time because it looks as if, and the news is reporting
Yeah,
Russia, which could be
So
propaganda.
let me say this. I do not support a country aggressively invading another country, right?
Yeah, I mean, it
have
looks like he's taking his
complete-
time to not aggressively invade, though.
I take complete sympathy for the people of Ukraine. I do not support Russia invading the Ukraine. That being said, I wish Russia would just hurry up and fucking win it.
But they're taking their time, though, Dylan, because they don't want to hurt civilians. The Ukrainians, Amnesty International came out with that article about how they're doing the thing that Saddam Hussein did at the end. You know, when all else fails, get behind the civilians. We're making them human shields, and that's what Zelensky's doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, in terms of like in the
I suppose
quotes,
our
rules
government
of
would do.
war,
Our
in
government would
terms of
totally
the
do
quotes
that.
rules of war, Ukraine's breaking all of them, and Russia doesn't appear to be doing that. As far as who knows what's actually happening?
They're not, yeah,
right?
well,
I mean,
because
it's
they're
no
not
fog of
losing.
war.
So they're not losing. So the people who usually are losing are the ones that getting behind the civilians. Like that's what happened.
And I also want to say, I'm sure Vladimir Putin is a cold-blooded, psychopathic murderer.
I'm sure.
I'm sure that guy has a zillion bodies buried in his backyard. I'm not saying I like him, but if we think he's dumb or that we think that he's worse than any other big leader that's ever existed on the face of the planet, we're deluding ourselves. There's nothing particularly evil about Vlad that wasn't particularly evil about George Bush. I mean, let's be real.
George Bush was dumb. Speaking of dumb, do you think this would happen when Trump was president? Speaking of dumb,
well, he claims not, but I mean, I understand why Putin did it. I watched a brilliant video by, I believe, the YouTube channel Real Life Lore that broke this down very, very effective. Wendover Productions, whatever, one of the two, that broke this down very, very well. Which was that if you look at the geography of Russia, and I should say the eastern section in general, right? I mean, where exactly the borders have landed over the last 1,000 years, whatever, right? Is that Europe is very, very, very mountainous. And then once you hit like Hungary, Poland sort of area, it goes flat, right? Which means in Europe, it's a lot easier to just wall up in the mountains or wall up in a castle, if we're in medieval times, than it is in Russia, where you have these big plains and that the Mongols can just come riding in and flatten everything, right? So if you look at the creeping NATO alliance that has been acquiring these formerly eastern states, the Ukraine is the last one that pierces that border. That pierces that geography. And what I mean by that is right now, Russia could still defend from the mountains in terms of where NATO could invade. If Ukraine becomes part of NATO, then suddenly there's this big, wide plain that NATO could move right up next to Russia on and invade from the easily massive, just go in every direction, right? So I mean, from I've heard Putin say, at least this is what the translation at the bottom of the damn screen says because I don't understand Russian, is talking about Western aggression. And, someone who doesn't understand what I just said says, what Western aggression? We didn't attack you. Well, if you look at the geography of the way NATO has been creeping over into Russia, yeah, I could see it. And if the Ukraine was the last link to go to push that over, him saying that, I'm getting there first, motherfucker. I don't blame him.
I mean, he's not the only Russian president that's talked about
aggressive
this.
war, but I don't blame him. What's that?
They've been warning about this for the longest time. In fact, Gorbachev was talking about it. The Russians, a lot of Boris Yeltsin was talking about the NATO aggression, and they were talking about how Ukraine should not be joining NATO because NATO was formed because we don't like communists. We didn't like the Soviet Union. NATO was formed because we didn't like Communist Party of China. We didn't like this. We didn't like the communists. In fact, we followed them all the way into Afghanistan, remember? And then armed the Mujahideen. So that's the whole reason NATO was formed. It was a colonizing force to make sure that the communists wouldn't be trading, because communists don't trade with anybody but communists. And we didn't like their little party.
Yes, go ahead.
We didn't like that little party that they had. We didn't like it at all. We armed the Mujahideen just to get rid of the Soviets in Afghanistan. So this is all because of that. And so when Zelensky is talking about joining NATO, I mean, that's right on the Russian border. And a lot of presidents throughout the entire history of Russia were like, that is the last straw. That is the final straw. And so
by the geography point that I just pointed out, it exactly is the final straw. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I don't think Biden cares. In fact, he like literally has like,
whether or not Biden cares, I don't know if that matters, because obviously he's not the one making any decisions.
I mean, his speeches are I don't know who's worse, Lindsey Graham or Joe Biden when it comes to.
I think if I had to pick the two, I would pick Joe Biden, because at least Joe Biden you can get a chuckle. Lindsey Graham is like lightning bolt.
Fire and fury, we'll kill them all.
Yeah.
This guy, I swear to God, he is a queen that is very angry.
Lindsey Graham is bad, man. He's bad.
He wants to nuke everything. He's talking about riots in the streets. Did you hear about that?
I think so.
Here, let's play this up for you, Dylan.
Lindsey Graham raising eyebrows with these comments following the FBI's retrieval of at least 184 classified documents from Mar-a-Lago.
If there's a prosecution of Donald Trump for mishandling classified information after the Clinton debacle, which you presided over and did a hell of a good job, there'll be riots in the streets.
Joining us now, New York Magazine Washington correspondent Olivia Nuzzi and New York One political reporter Emily No.
So look, I get the whole being mad about the FBI. I mean, the FBI is, like you said, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's what I call them, and like they are. But this guy is always talking about riots and nuking people, and why?
So I think one thing that's important to understand about most of these peoples at these higher levels of government is they've got their own thing going on, and they have certain things that they need to say for their constituency in order to continue getting votes. And whenever they appear, they say those things, and after they've said those things, they go off and do whatever the hell that is they were doing before. So I don't know how you can stand listening to this shit. I do not surf through the mainstream media looking for stuff.
I have to, Dylan. I have to listen to these guys.
And if you do have to listen to these guys, just remember this: if you try to approach these people from a rational standpoint, they're not going to make any sense.
I know.
Look, and I mean, like literally, let's break that down. If something, there's going to be riot in the streets. First of all, I don't understand the syllogism that you just put together. A is to B, therefore, and B is to C, therefore A is to C. Like I don't see how you did that. And what exactly does riots in the streets mean?
That's what I'm saying.
BLM style summer of love, burn everything down, Antifa riots in the streets, or some peaceful people walking down the street, and you send the FBI in there for some undercover agents to start throwing some rocks in order to instigate things, and now you have riots. I mean, like,
about that.
And there wouldn't be riots in the streets if anything has shown. The Trump supporters are very level-headed and they don't go rioting.
Okay. I mean, what about the January 6th, though? The Liz Cheney. She blew the top off. Oh, and the Cassidy Hudson. She talked about her clavicles. You think about
who's Cassidy? Oh, Cassidy.
Okay,
Who?
so let me rephrase this. I know you don't watch a lot of this shit, bro, but apparently there was some January 6th explosive information. They got this woman, Cassidy Hutchinson, okay? And she's a witness because she knew a Secret Service agent
This is sounding familiar. Keep talking.
that was driving Donald Trump.
Oh yeah.
Donald Trump was like, "No, I got to get to the insurrection," and he's like, "No," and he's like, goes over, he reaches to the steering wheel, and he grabs the steering wheel, and then he tried to check that guy's clavicles, and she's like, "No, Mr. President, we're going back to the White House. Stop it!" And then
and then it turned out there was no corroborating evidence whatsoever to back that up.
I just think it's funny that in this hearing, it's not like court.
Did you not see?
It's hearsay
with the January 6th show trials, like Liz Cheney and the other fuckwads, like they're literally just reading the screen in front of them. There was a picture with reader boards. I mean, it's show trial Nuremberg or Stalin show trial style bullshit, right? And
it's so embarrassing.
So here's, I'll tell you the important thing to understand about January 6th. And I mean, first of all, it was entirely instigated by, I don't know if it was Antifa or BLM or the FBI or the police inside the building. The police let them in. I mean, look up Ray Epps for God's sake. You heard that name yet?
No, Ray Epps.
Ray EPPS. Ray Epps has been called out numerous times in groups of we'll call MAGA conservatives or right-leaning people, where he says stuff like, "We need to go into the White House and we need to, remove these people." And everybody looks at him and goes, "Fed, Fed, 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 Fed." I mean, the right is so used to this at this point because they try to organize, and they know a Fed tries to get in there, and the strategy is to incite violence to try to get them to do it.
Yes,
right.
It is.
And so the police were there inviting people in. Like, give me a break. And then Ray Epps, this guy who was in this other thing, was one of the people. I mean, if you watch the video, Ray Epps walks up to the policeman standing behind the gate, whispers something into his ear, and then the policeman opens it and everybody comes in.
I'm a Fed, probably. Interesting.
So, now, this is not the important thing to understand about January 6th. The important thing to understand about January 6th is the definition of domestic terrorism.
Okay.
So, did you know that per the U.S. Code, to be labeled a domestic terrorist, the definition is to appear, to intend, to intimidate.
So the
public
FBI
official. Hold on, a public official or a civilian population.
Oh, okay.
Let me say that again. Appear, to intend, to intimidate. That's 3 levels of subjectivity.
Yeah.
So, Tommy, you appear to be intending to intimidate me right now, and I'm a civilian population, domestic terrorist. Boom.
You sound like AOC right now. Violence.
Well, and I mean, let's just take a step back from the fact that we live in this country and we have emotions connected to what's going on. If we just look at history and we say, okay, a country passed a law that says this, or like clearly that's for the government to selectively enforce on anybody that they don't like. Right.
Especially Trump.
To enforce on Trump, or Trump to enforce it?
To enforce on Trump. You know,
right.
that whole affidavit thing, the executive order that they chose was signed by Barack Obama. It's hilarious how amazing like this whole police state thing goes.
Right. Well, let me finish the point. This is super important.
Go ahead.
So you can label somebody a domestic terrorist per that definition, but you cannot charge them. In order to charge somebody as a domestic terrorist, they have to have a connection to an international organization.
A domestic terrorist?
Yes. So they have to appear to intend to intimidate, blah, 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 that definition, and be connected to an international organization.
So how does that... But they're domestic
This is why they haven't been able to charge anyone from J6 with shit. Even if the media is jumping down and going domestic terrorist, domestic terrorist, domestic terrorist, domestic terrorist, label according to the law, yes, they can do that. But they can't charge them for it. The holy grail of our Illuminati overlords, the Holy Grail is to remove the international requirement from the domestic terrorism charge. Because once they could do that, and you have 3 levels of subjectivity to label somebody with that, then it could be applied at any level for any reason at any time.
What about due process, though? Is that going to work out?
I mean, these are the things that are still in the way, and this is part of the erosion of the system. Is you do it? They're working on it a death by 1,000 cuts, but that one is a deep cut. If they can get that, that's a really, 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 really deep cut. And I've got a plan.
Cool. What is it?
So this is something I learned from CSG. So I don't know how much of all the videos you're watching on my show, but I do interview people running for positions on a somewhat regular basis, right? And one of the guys I interviewed is running for a congressional position in the House of Representatives at Washington, D.C., and he just won the primary, so he's going up against the Democratic incumbent, and it's people are pissed off at the Democrats, and we're all predicting the red wave, the red wave, and it's a contested area, so he's got a good chance of winning.
Where is it again? Where'd you say it was? Well, it's
Washington.
State? Washington. Oh, Washington State.
This is District 8, if anybody cares. Okay. So in this interview, I brought up this domestic terrorism thing. I'm like, what do you think about this? And of course, now I didn't expect him to know it. Who know? I mean, even a legislator who knows all the fucking laws that are a zillion pages thick, right? I brought this up to him, and he's like, no, that's crazy. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I said, well, suppose you win. Would you be against introducing a resolution or policy, depending on what the power structure is at that point, because a resolution does not go by the president for a veto or sign off, whereas policy does. Would you be against putting forth a resolution or a policy that states it is not the intention of Congress to remove the international requirement for the domestic terrorism charge? And think about it. Imagine it's just a resolution, and I'll get into why a resolution may or may not be something useful. If it's just a resolution doesn't have any teeth. It's not changing any policy. And this gets forced into Congress. Even if the entirety of Congress wants to vote no against that, can they be seen voting no against that? I vote no. I do think that it is my intention that the international requirement should be removed from the domestic terrorism charge. They can be seen doing that. Right?
If they spin it though, that's when politics comes into play, though, Dylan. Well, they're gonna change the language on that.
I understand, but that's a hard one
on
to spin.
MSNBC.
This is an international
thing. They want to really. I mean, when it comes to the FBI, there's nothing hard to spin. They can literally make anybody accuse anything. I mean,
I don't imagine that this would be something. I don't imagine that this would be something that the media would pick up on. But I don't think it's something that the media would pick up on, because they don't pick up on resolutions, right? So
there was a very important resolution, bro, about Joe Biden put into a place about how the unilateral part of war, the Iraq War, how the president could just go and do what he wanted to. I mean, Joe Biden voted on that resolution, and he was on the Arms and Ways Committee. He made that resolution so that the president could just do what he wanted throughout the entirety of the Iraq War. So that was a big ass thing. And it was all about American safety, right?
The resolution doesn't actually allow that. The resolution just expresses intention. Here's the interesting thing I learned about a resolution, because the whole time I've heard of resolutions, I said, well, who gives a shit about resolutions? It's not an actual law. Okay, I resolve something. Who cares? Here's the deal, is that if you pass a resolution, that becomes the stepping stone to go to the next point, because you say, okay, we passed a resolution that says that we intend X. Well, if we do intend X, then we need to look at the policy, because this is our intention. And if something comes against that intention, we have to go, wait a minute, we just passed a resolution saying that we don't intend that, right? That's the first wedge to get in there. Now, I interviewed this guy. I asked him this question, and he said, without hesitation, I would absolutely do that. So guess what? If he wins, I've got his motherfucking phone number. I'm going to go, hey, remember that conversation that we had about the resolution? I got you on video saying that. I mean, hopefully he would just be like, oh, yeah, well, let's do it.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, that's what I would think too, Dylan. But then AOC is she ran on Medicare for all. Guess what? She never talks about Medicare for all. I hope it works out. I hope it's better off than the Justice Democrats was, because we came up with Justice Democrats just so we could get Medicare all on the House floor, and then when it came time for the squad to do that, they all just voted for Nancy Pelosi anyway. They didn't even force the vote at all. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about the Democratic side other than the faster they crash and burn, the faster they can turn into something more productive.
I feel like that too, bro. Because why is it they're so fall in line like that? I mean, I think maybe the Republicans kind of are, but then they really do care about their constituency, what the constituency says when you call them like that. The Democrats, they just fall in line. They don't care about us at all. They just
I mean, the right would say that the left just does groupthink, and the right is more about individual this, individual that, which is a strength and a weakness on both ends, because the right is so I'm an individual that they won't work together.
Okay, so yeah.
I'll do this by myself. No, you won't.
So is that what happened with the Trump administration, or what? What do you think went wrong with that? Because he might run again, so he should learn a lesson.
Well, I hope he runs again, and I will vote for him when he runs again. My guess is that he surrounded himself with people that he didn't realize were stabbing him in the back. I suspect that was really his downfall.
I mean, he just got done just like destroying George W. Bush and talking about how George. Then he hires Nicole Wallace and not Nicole Wallace, but
Michael Bolton. With
Bolton.
The walrus mustache. Yeah, that was.
And they all wrote books. They all wrote books about how horrible he was afterwards.
Right. Which makes me love him even more. I mean, like, the George Bush motherfucker that I hate wrote books about how much he hates Donald Trump.
Right. But
I guess I like him even more now.
I mean, just like the FBI going to like in the first place, why did Trump hire these people? And it could be because Sheldon Adelson told him to. Robert Mercer told him to. Who was pulling Donald Trump's strings to pick his cabinet?
What the Jew-hating alt-right says is Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner?
Yeah, his daughter's husband.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah. He's a cutie pie. I don't know much about him, but I just know he's kind of hot, and so is Ivanka's very pretty. So I'm sure they'll make great kids, but I don't know much about them except they're both wealthy, and the fact remains that and Jewish. I mean, they'll make great kids though. And Donald Trump, bro, he should not have put these guys in his cabinet in the first place. And he should have known. He should have known who the snakes were. In fact, he said, I would put the best people. Remember, he said, I'll put the best people in. He put the people from the George W. Bush administration, the one that he was bashing in the first place.
I don't know. And then the only thing I can say is if you're in that position and you have 400 million things to do every single day, how much time do you have to spend?
That's why you put the right people in.
How much time? You have 400 million people to put in. Right. And then half the time you've got to say, okay, advisors, I don't know this guy. I don't have time to get on the internet for 4 hours tonight and look him up. You advise me. And then it goes back to if the advisors are bad, then
I know, Dylan, you already have your cabinet picked out, and you're not even running for office, but I know you already have your cabinet picked out. I do too.
Me?
Yes.
No,
don't you?
No.
I know exactly who I'd put into place to make the decisions. Yeah, bro. You haven't thought about that? Who would you put in your cabinet?
Well, I think about it backwards. If I meet somebody where I'm like, you would be good in this position, then I haven't. But it's not like, okay, here's my cabinet, and I'm going to think of who I would put in there. No, I haven't thought like that. I'm more interested. You got to get the position first before you worry about something like that.
I mean, that's true, but if Trump had thought about that a little bit more, maybe we would have.
I don't Trump this, Trump that. I don't know, right?
Well, the only reason I'm saying is I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, but I'm just saying that if he's going to run again, that he needs.
Yeah, he is going to run. I think he is, barring any health concerns. right? Because he is older.
Barring DeSantis, you mean? Barring DeSantis.
No, I don't. Even if DeSantis runs, I don't think it'll. I think he'll easily pass the primary. My guess with DeSantis is if the left can encourage DeSantis to run, then they're hoping for at least a contentious primary, so that contention can run into the general. But
it's kind of got contentious already. DeSantis released some ads about, they've been hitting each other a little bit already, so it's been interesting.
That I don't know. I don't necessarily trust DeSantis either. But the point that I wanted to make is that, I'm not saying that the office of the president isn't important. However, I try to bring it back to, what do I have control over, right? I don't have control over Trump. He's going to do what he's going to do. I do not have enough power to affect that, at least yet, right? What do I have the power to affect, right? Is it my locality? Is it running? Is it supporting people? Is it engaging in systematic politics? Like I said, can I influence this congressman to do whatever, right? If I put it more on that realm, because I'm very, very convinced that the voting system is completely not completely, but very significantly fraudulent. And if we had more local effort for decades leading up to it, maybe they could have been addressed before all this shit happened, right? But now we're playing catch up. And this week I'm supposed to interview a guy here who's I've had him on the show before, but he's says he's got some significant stuff on what's going on in the state of Washington. I'm pretty excited to drop that one. But I mean, whatever the particular issue is, it's not like the president sits on the top of the pyramid and says, okay, this happens everywhere, and then that happens everywhere. And he goes, this happens everywhere, that happens everywhere. It doesn't happen like that, right? The powers that be have to have these incredibly intricate, multitudinous networks in order to say, okay, if we want policy X and we want to spread it uniformly across the whole country, I mean, billions of dollars. I don't know how many people and how many associations and how many networks and all, blah, 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 all the sorts of stuff. They're not going through the president, right?
No, not at that time.
So if you want to influence things, you got to learn. I mean, yeah, it'd be cool if I could influence Donald Trump, but I'm not there yet, right?
Oh, I'm just talking about. I was asking questions about him because people want to know. People want to know.
Yeah, well, and I understand
what he's going to do.
And it's so easy to get wrapped up in the fucking drama about Trump did this or Trump didn't do that or he should have done this or he should have done that. And again, I'm not saying that the presidential seat isn't important, but I am grateful that the election was stolen so in your face, because it woke a ton of people up. And they went, I need to do something about this because this is a big problem. Because if the election hadn't won, here's another problem with conservatives. They have rapture syndrome.
I think we talked about this last time.
Yeah, they're waiting for someone to come save them. And Donald, and I'm not saying that they thought Donald Trump was Jesus. I'm just saying they're programmed to think that way. Like, oh, he's there. He's going to take care of everything. I'm just going to sit back and watch him.
Yeah, because they like hierarchies, and he's the leader and the father.
Well, I don't know if to say that like hierarchies.
That's why they believe in Jesus, right?
No, well, I'm not going to address that in a single sentence. But I think what's with the conservatives in general, there's a distrust of government, right?
Oh,
and they extend that to say, because government is corrupt, I should not get involved with it.
Interesting.
Because that would be icky. That would be corrupting of me, right? And then furthermore, they say, well, if you ask for money to get involved politically, you're grifting. So if someone's like, hey, I'm dedicating 100% of my time for this, I need to make enough money as if I had a job. They go, oh, you're just in this for the money. The left doesn't do that. The left gets involved and they throw money everywhere. right?
Right.
So it's a major weakness, and I think it's a weakness of the mind and the weakness of the spirit from the conservative sides, where it's like, yeah, okay, so this guy, I mean, just for example, there's potentially a lawsuit that's about to drop, or multiple lawsuits that are about to drop here in Washington State, covering a bunch of. Actually, no, I won't talk about that. I'll talk about me personally. I want to sue an aspect of the state. I have a pretty good case against it, but I need a lawyer. I found a guy who could do it, but he's actually wrapped up in this other lawsuit that I switched topics from. And when we were talking about, you know, I asked him, like, what would it cost? And he's like, oh, well, you know, it could be like $15,000 or $20,000. And I'm like, well, you know, if what I want to do is impactful enough, we should just say it's like $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000, right? Because let's think higher. And he's like, oh yeah, but you know, you do that, and they say, oh yeah, you're just in this for the money. It's like, okay, if you are going to do this really big thing, which is really important, whatever it is, doesn't even matter for the sake of this argument, isn't that worth like $1 million? Like, if you accomplish this thing, aren't you a motherfucking hero? And we should like just shower you with money and women because you did this amazing thing. Shouldn't that be our mindset, right? And I mean, I'm more than happy to get in any conservative's face where it's just like, you need to shut the fuck up and open your wallet, or get on your ass and work. If you want to get something done. You know, I heard somebody say, conservatives, once it comes to political action, they suddenly become socialist. They want everybody else to work for them for free. Yeah,
I can see that. I can see that.
You didn't like my definition of socialist?
I feel like socialism is seizing the means of production, which is what we should all be doing. We should all be having ownership, and you know, like, I really applaud what you're doing with your businesses. You're getting involved. You're,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you know, you showed your workers that you know, that they matter. So I, as a leftist,
Well,
really appreciate what you
the
did.
ones that I didn't want to kick out, at least. There was one in particular that he didn't matter. He can get the hell out of there.
Okay, well, thank you for being honest with me. But I mean, all it is about, it's perception of fairness and injustice, and that's really what me as a leftist focuses on, is the equality and equity. And so that's what.
Well, I mean, you know, the right comes back and says, when you say equality, are you talking equality of opportunity or equality of outcome?
Equality of opportunity, and then equality of outcome. What does that mean to you? Equality
of outcome means, okay, we all need to make the same amount of money at the end of this.
Same amount of money at the end of this? No, I don't think so. I don't think.
Okay, then we're on the same page. Yeah,
I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about that. I mean, I believe. Look, I'm a competitive person, and I believe that people that work more should get paid more. But this whole oligarchical gatekeeping, transaction, extracting of our wealth and our labor, and outsourcing of our jobs to Malaysian girls that don't get paid under the minimum wage. This is just not fair.
Well, and I mean, it's neither left or right. I think that's the problem that we need to address. Like this is, you said the word right, oligarchy. This isn't a conservative progressive thing. This is a master slave thing, right? Where book I recommend. It's 47 million pages. It's like 1,300 pages. Written by E. Michael Jones. I've interviewed him a couple times. It's called I may have mentioned this last time. The barren middle, the conflict between a view of economics between the conflict of usury and labor.
Okay.
Right? And
usury, I've heard that word a lot. What is that exactly?
Charging interest on a loan.
Okay, charging interest on a loan.
Any amount of interest, period.
Okay.
Even if it's 1%, that's usury.
Okay.
So in the Catholic tradition, usury was outlawed. Because basically I'm trying to remember how E. Michael Jones phrased it, but it's essentially, you're not taking on enough risk for that money, and you're putting the person in a position where they can become a debt slave as a result, right? And then it was outlawed, and they got around it. Medieval in the medieval times, they got around it by either doing it in secret or bringing Jews in, right? Because the Jews had no problem with it because that was their tradition, and the Christians went, well, they're not Christians, so our rules don't apply. There was that tension for the longest time, but it was when apparently Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation came around, they lost that connection. And not only Martin Luther, I think in particular John Calvin was very promoting of usury, and that flipped it over. And then once we got to Newton created the deterministic universe that didn't require God to have things function anymore, because he came up with two ideas, which was inertia, the resistive force, and gravity, which is the attractive force. And these two things, working against each other is what creates all the movement. That got projected onto economics through Adam Smith. And Adam Smith comes up with this whole free market idea. And the conservatives really misunderstand what's originally meant by free market. Because the conservatives think, okay, free market means we could just freely trade with each other without government coercion, which is great. That's a great idea, right? But what free market meant to the British and the Dutch was, you're not going to trade with us. We're going to come in with cannons. And we're going to charge usury. And we can pay you whatever the hell we want. You mentioned minimum wage. We can pay you absolute subsistence or less than absolute subsistence level, because hey, that's what you agreed to, and that's just the way things are, and that's the market rate and whatever, right? So that's like the origination of the term free market comes from Adam Smith looking back to Newton, trying to create an economic system that was similar to the system of Newton's physics. And he comes up with the idea of the invisible hand, right? I think this is just completely damning to the history of economics. The invisible hand basically says, okay, there's the buyer and the seller, or the employee and the employer, and they have contradicting interests. And they're both acting out of self-interest, right? Greed and self-interest. But because they're acting against each other, they balance each other out. And through the entirety of the market, they have this higgling and biggling of the market that goes back and forth. When you look at it in totality, because you have both sides fighting each other, it ends up balancing itself out at the appropriate spot. This is entirely made up horseshit. So if you look at Newton's universe, you have inertia, which is the resistive force, and you have gravity, which is the attractive force, right? In Adam Smith's system, you have self-interest, and then you have competition, right? It's the same thing where you say, okay, you have these two opposing forces, and that they work together to create a system that creates balance. So basically, the science of economics, we're still repeating these ideas from Adam Smith. It's pseudo-physics. It's all it is.
Okay. And so supply and demand are those two forces also, right, that are supposed to be...
Well, how does supply and demand work is the explanation of the forces. And then from Professor Werner, which is what I was talking about on our show today. We didn't bring it up at the show today. I want to do another show where in this article, he just rips apart the common economic understanding, which is based around the holy grail of the supply and demand curve, right? Which is to say, okay, there's a certain supply and there's a certain demand, and then the price is going to automatically function to fit, wherever the two are. And he said, and I'm doing this from memory, but he's like, I can think of 8 instantaneous problems with this. First of all, it assumes that everybody has perfect information, right? So we don't need consultants. We don't need lawyers. We don't need financial news. We don't need any of that, because we all have perfect information. It also assumes that there's no transport costs or exchange fees, right? So there's no agents. There's no real estate agents. There's no brokers. None of these people, because nobody's taking a cut in the middle. That's all gone. Everybody has infinite time. right? Because we all instantaneously have all the information that we need to make the perfect purchase all the time, and we're spending all day, every day, transacting with each other in order to make these perfect transactions. There's no such thing as children anymore because we're completely self-interested. We don't have time, and we don't have an interest in taking care of the kids. So there's no such thing as children anymore. I mean, he just goes on and on and on, just how goddamn ridiculous this idea is, like the fundamental premise of what modern economics is.
I agree.
And then he points out is that what you really need to look at is what side has the power when it comes between supply and demand. And he says whatever one is the shorter one has the power. So let's take a real estate market. If you have more buyers than sellers, sellers have the power. If you have more sellers than buyers, buyers have the power. That is much more determinant of the price than this magical equilibrium that's happening. And that's the big thing. The equilibrium as well. There's no such thing as equilibrium. It's horseshit. Well, like this idea.
I thought that was a physics. I thought that was a physics theory as well. Equilibrium, isn't it?
No. I'm talking physics, maybe, right? And this is where we get the pseudophysics. Is there's a thing that physics doesn't have that economics does have, which is individuals making choices. There's no individuals making choices in physics, right? Right. If I drop the rock, I can say, well, there's the rock doesn't change its mind and go sideways halfway down, right? Humans do that, and humans are more emotional than they are rational.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So the entire goddamn premise of physics, of economics is so turned on its head that we cannot have a rational conversation about it. So we started this over the, what is the free market, right? Again, the conservatives look at it and they say, look, I want to be able to exchange with people without the government coercing me. Great. That's not what they're talking about when they say free market. Like, free market means neoliberal style. Okay, we're going to shut down the industry there and ship it over to China and force China to trade with us so they can hire 4-year-olds, probably too young, 7 and 8-year-old girls to make these shoes for 3 cents an hour so they can, die by the time that they're 22 because they've been working. I mean, that's free market to them.
That's correct. And that is the thing that they don't understand. That's really the thing they don't understand. I agree with you.
Yeah, and so I think this is the parties, they can make a big show fighting about this stuff and saying that this is a left-right issue when it's really a top-bottom issue, master and slave issue, right?
Yeah, agree.
I think similar to the student loans where it's like, okay,
totally agree with you.
Should that person have made that decision or not? Well, I don't know, but it's really, really easy for you to just fix the whole damn problem right now.
Okay, so I mean, amazing. You really discussed, you really illustrated that point like so well. That's exactly what they do think free markets like that. Free market really is like that because that's what they've been doing for the past 40 years. That's what they've been doing. They've been outsourcing jobs to that's the reason why they won't raise the minimum wage either. And you know what, Dylan? That's the reason why.
And we don't need a minimum wage. We need you could forget the whole fucking minimum wage if you just had a federal transition job.
A federal transition job. What do you mean by
that? The leftist MMTers like to refer to this as a federal job guarantee because they've missed the point. So, okay, what is the most fundamental unit of the economy? What gives the economy value?
The dollar?
No. Not the way that we keep track of it. Like, okay. I'm not talking about money and finances and stuff. I'm talking about goods and services, us interacting with each other as a society. What's the fundamental thing that gives the economy value?
Labor?
Yes.
What? Yeah, okay.
It's labor, right?
Yeah.
So if labor is the fundamental thing that gives economy value, and in order for the economy to function correctly, labor has to earn enough money to purchase the things that the economy is creating.
Correct.
Right. And E. Michael Jones's book, he points this out over and over again in the history of economics is nobody's learning this lesson. Like they try to and Venice was a bit no, Venice, Florence. Florence was a great example of this in like the 1500s Machiavelli time, where he said they had this incredible wool industry, but they couldn't figure out that they had to pay their own wool workers enough to buy the fucking products. They just couldn't. They just couldn't figure that out. So, if you said, okay, let's, instead of saying, well, we need a gold standard or we need this standard, well, let's have a labor standard, and let's say labor in the United States or in Washington, or if it's a state level decision or whatever, is worth $15 an hour, whatever, right? And the government says, okay, we will create a system where no matter what, you can come here and get a job for $15 an hour. Period. Doesn't matter what else is going on in the economy. And I mean, this could be public works projects or keep streets sweeping. Whatever the locality needs, or the whatever level of government needs for that task, right?
Okay.
And because the federal government has infinite money creation power, there's no burden to the government to create this money. And I'm answering why we don't need a minimum wage, if the government is offering $15 an hour for a guaranteed slot, well, sure, business down the street, you can offer 12, but no one's going to work for you.
So that's almost like
right?
a price floor, economic price floor.
Exactly. It sets a price floor. And so this is where it gets really interesting, because it is a thing for money to drain out of a community, right? If you've got a small community here next to the city, everybody goes to the city to work, they spend all their money there, they come home, all the money gets drained out of the community, right? For a dorky example. So if the money gets drained out of the community, people can't buy enough stuff, then what that means is, if we take a restaurant, for example, let's say they have a productive capacity that they can do $5,000 a day. If they're full and going to town, right? But as the money drains out, no one can get in there, and now they're down to $3,000 a day, to $2,000 a day, $1,000 a day. At some point, they're like, we can't open shop, because increasing prices isn't the issue. We don't have enough people walking into the door.
Correct.
Right. If you have a federal transition job, so let's say that restaurant goes out of business and liquidates the people working there. They no longer have jobs. They turn around and they go to the federal transition job, and the federal transition job says, well, we hire anybody at any time. When they pay, that's money getting created out of nothing. That money then goes into the system, and they can spend it, for example, at the restaurant. And then that restaurant can start getting customers. And then the restaurant can say, okay, now that we are closer to capacity, we need more people to work. Hey, I'll pay you $17 to come out of there and come over here. Right? That also stops the money creation that guy was doing by working there. And so if we want to talk about an automatic stabilizer, is that if the place runs out of money, boom, the federal transition job kicks in, creates more money, that gets the private sector more business, that they can say, oh, we can hire the people out of the federal transition job, and boom, okay, the money creation stopped, we've got enough. Right? So, this is the MMT formula.
Right.
Now, the leftists get it confused, and they think that the federal transition job is a permanent form of employment.
Okay.
Say, oh, we could just hire everybody now, and everybody can have a job. No, that's not the point of it. The point of it is to get people employed and back into the private sector, because that's how the money system works.
I think you persuaded me on that. Actually. You're really good at explaining things.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like hearing you talk, because it really just creates a picture. It paints a picture of exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Well, and then again, okay, let's go back to the left-right thing.
Yeah.
This isn't I'm not making a left or right argument. I'm identifying how the motherfucking monetary system works.
Yeah.
It works like that.
Did I say something about right or left?
No, you didn't. But people, because if I say, well, I support a federal transition job, everyone's going to think I'm communist, right? What I'm saying, this is a non-left-right issue. This is identifying how the system works. A left-right issue would be, hey, we think we should make this a permanent institution in order to permanently employ people in the government. That would be a left interpretation. A right interpretation would say, no, this is just restabilize in order to fix a community to get these people back into the private sector. That's a left-right argument, right? The fact that it should be there is just recognizing how the system works.
I agree.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, and then here, let's make this argument here. Here's for the libertarians, which is to say, okay, all government's bad.
Okay.
And the libertarians who aren't specifically anarchists, the minarchists, say, okay, we only want government for the small number of things, which is basically to protect rights and promote security, basic, courts and contract enforcement and stuff like that. So, and they say we only support negative rights. A negative right being something where I don't need anybody to do anything for me to keep that right. In order for me to have freedom of speech, nobody has to do a goddamn thing. Right. And then they say, okay, a positive right would be something like the right to health care. In order for me to have the right to health care, somebody else has to do something for me. That's the difference between a positive and negative right. So they would make the argument the federal transition job, right to work, is a positive right and therefore is not valid.
Who would make this argument?
Libertarian.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the counter argument that the wise MMTer has, which would be me, is yes, but government creates the problem of unemployment by demanding a tax. Right? If we're in a state of nature in the Enlightenment era thinking, right, and there is no government and we're just savages that subsist on throwing rocks at rabbits and eating them all day, right? And there's no government. And then the government comes along and then says, okay, you now owe us tax money in this arbitrary token that we just made up. You and I are now unemployed. Right? Okay. To be unemployed is to not be working in something that pays you in the unit of account. The unit of account is the tax token. Right?
The tax
so
token.
Government creates the problem of unemployment by demanding the tax. Therefore, they have the duty to give you access to the token in order to pay that tax. Analogous to, I'm pretty sure it's the Fourth Amendment, which is to say the government can throw you in jail. Therefore, it has a duty to give you a speedy trial and to give you legal representation if you can't afford it.
Yes.
Right? Because I don't think a libertarian would have a problem with the Fourth Amendment. Right?
I don't. The only person that has a problem with the Fourth Amendment are the Democrats, Republicans. So.
Good point. But I mean, philosophically speaking, I'm making the argument that the federal transition job, as a in quotes right to work, is analogous to the Fourth Amendment.
Right. If
you understand how the system works, which requires dumping the barter theory of money. If you're with if you're stuck with the barter theory of money, none of this makes any sense. When you recognize that the barter theory of money doesn't really have any evidence to support it, and the credit theory of money is more likely to be reality, this makes a whole heck of a lot more sense. And then you say, okay, well, the government has the monopoly control over the issuance of currency. It's the only place where money can come from. So therefore, if it doesn't create it, nobody has any money. So what is the appropriate way to create it? Well, if we said labor is the source of value and we want to set labor as the price floor, and that's the most moral way for us to do it, then that would be the way that you would have to set it up. And it would be consistent with the principles, at least as we have, of the United States.
Wouldn't it be great if our leaders listen to things like what you're saying? Listen to you.
Warren Mosler is the guy who put together most of these ideas, right, for modern monetary theory.
Yeah.
And him, and now that we're me and Nima are getting into Professor Richard Wagner, have both expressed the fact that they will talk to higher level people. For example, Warren Moser said this about Paul Krugman, that dork, right? He had a conversation with Paul Krugman, explained to him MMT. Paul Krugman got it, nodded along, and rephrased the arguments back to him accurately, meaning he got it. They say this to all these other people. They nod along, they get it, and then they never do it.
Interesting. So there must be some kind of reason for that. It must be an establishment or an oligarch.
We're just discussing that today.
That's interesting. So that's when you know it's an us versus them kind of fucking thing, like because they get
so
it.
there's us versus them, but there's also a natural force behind this, and I think Carol Quigley just nails it on the head in his book, The Evolution of Civilizations, where a organization that's created for a specific goal will eventually become subsumed by internal vested interests that have where the organization no longer serves its original goal but serves the organization itself.
That's exactly
and the original goal either becomes secondary or even contradictory to what the organization does later.
I mean, that's what George Washington said about these political parties, how they usurp the reins of government and carve for themselves from the very engines that which brought them to unjust dominion. That's exactly what he said.
I mean, I think don't cross too many streams here, because then
I'm
we're
just
going to
saying.
get. Is there such a thing as not having political parties? And we can look at
I'm not just bashing the political parties. I'm just saying that like there's not a thing, Dylan. If you notice, there's not a thing that was meant for good and for technology that isn't just become the enemy after a while, like television, for example, or the internet. Like all of these things were meant for education and
let me finish what Carol Quigley had to say, because
go ahead.
I
just made me think about all these things.
Yeah, so I gave you the general, now let me give you the specifics as I remember them off the top of my head. So why does this happen? What is the specific thing that causes these things to happen? The first is that an organization naturally isn't a thing. It's made up of individuals, right? And those individuals make individual choices. And in the organization, there's nobody's specific job to make sure that the organization accomplishes the goal of what it was supposed to set out to do. Right? I mean, if you work in the army, whose original purpose is to defend the nation, supposedly, right?
Right.
Does anybody have the specific job of defending the nation? Or is your job to take samples out of the nuclear submarine? Is it your job to cook for the soldiers? Is it your job to move ammunition? I mean, you know what I mean?
In a corporation, the big picture belongs to the CEO, is it right? He's supposed to make sure that the goal is to maximize profits and the growth of the company.
Is that the main goal of the corporation, or is the CEO just beholden to the shareholders who want to see the maximization of those profits?
So that's the goal then.
Well, okay. Let's talk about corporations, because I'm moving down that path, right? And so I just bought 2 assisted living facilities, right? So let's sit back, put our philosopher hats on. What is the purpose of an assisted living facility?
The purpose is to assist the elderly.
It's to assist the elderly, right? To give them a better quality of life that their families can't give them, if they don't have families and someone has to take care of them, right? That's the purpose of assisted living. So when everybody's working there, I own the place. I want to make money. The administrators, they want to make more money, and they want a functioning facility. The individual employees, they got things that they want. They want to work with this person, or they want a higher wage, or they don't want that shift, or they want a better job. All this stuff's going on. And one of the things that I'm concerned about, and obviously I wanted to make money, right? That's why I got involved. But my interpretation is that the reason we make money is because we achieve the goal, the original purpose. So when we make decisions, we need to frame it around, does this serve the people that are here? because that's what we're all fucking here for. That's what we're all making money, right?
And that's what the culture's for, the company culture, right?
Well, with that right now, I mean, but there's also something to be said. Like, okay, well, I could spend $1 zillion to take care of the people a little bit better, but that would bankrupt me, and then I can't take care of them at all, right? So I have to make money in order to take care. I mean, there's a feedback loop there, right?
Of course.
So I can do that because I'm aware of the problem.
Dylan, you scratched up, bro.
What's that?
Oh, you froze up for a second. You said I can do that because I'm aware of the problem, and then
I could do that because I'm aware of the problem, right?
Yeah.
And then before I dive into why I'm aware of the problem, I forgot to. I haven't described all three pieces of the problem. I described one. The first one is typically there's nobody's job. It is to make sure that the organization is achieving the original goal. The second one is, and I alluded to this a little bit, that every person is looking for their own benefit. Naturally. Why wouldn't they? Right? They want a promotion. They want to make more money. They want to have more vacation. They want a better status. They want to...
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But what that means is, as individuals, people are prioritizing, they're making decisions to prioritize their benefit over whatever that goal is. Right? The third and the killer, the big one, is that at some point you'll get vested interests that are more concerned about the way things are working right now because it serves them versus whatever the goal is supposed to be. And they're the ones that really fight back about changing anything. Right? Now, Quigley points out that this is not a deterministic process. This doesn't have to happen. Right?
It doesn't? Okay.
We have free will and we can make decisions. This is what I'm saying. Now that we're aware of it, and for my organization, now that I'm aware of it, I can specifically address it. If I wasn't aware of it...
How do you do that? The vested interests.
By the way, I don't have my regular charger for my computer.
Okay.
So I'm turning my screen down. So if my computer suddenly dies, sorry, I left it at my charger in my office today. And in fact, hold on. Let me try something. Play some music or chat by yourself or something.
I want to play something. I want to play the Senator Cruz.
Or that.
Okay, so guys, while doing that, I want to talk about my Senator Cruz. Senator Cruz, he has a goal. It's to piss off all the working people of Texas. So of course he made that fucking little thing about baristas and how they're fucking deadbeats. He likes to fucking mess with bartenders. He likes to mess with baristas. He's really such a douchebag, and I don't understand why Republicans put up with this because they're baristas, they're bartenders. But if you remember what he said about how they're hooked on the bong, and if the Democrats just give them $20,000 and they might get off the bong and want to vote for Democrats. So anyway, Senator Bernie Sanders, he made a little collage of who exactly he's talking to. I thought it was very effective. This could be very effective for Bernie. He's one of the contenders of 2024 as well. I don't know if I'm going to vote for him. He's way too old. I'm tired of voting for old people. Plus, he just keeps bending the knee to neoliberals. But this is a very...
He loves Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Or that.
I want to show his
campaign ad.
Ted Cruz got.
Or that slacker barista.
I'm a nurse at Temple, and as part of our contract, like our build up to our contract campaign, we polled our members about their student debt because we're going to be demanding that the employer also offset the debt, right? And so 120 of our members had a total of $7 million in nursing debt, in student debt.
These are nurses?
Yeah, these are nurses. And you have to have a college degree to be a nurse, and we're struggling in the hospital.
All right.
We need more nurses.
Who wasted 7 years in college studying completely useless things, now has loans and can't get a job. Joe Biden just gave you 20 grand.
I have like 80
something, $88,000 of debt that has just increased year after year. I mean,
They increase, that increases
yeah, because
interest rates.
they're all federal loans.
Yeah.
Some of them have 6-7% interest. I mean, we put off buying a house. I'm in my 30s. Put off buying a house. Put off getting married for a while. Don't know if we can have kids because student debt is, I mean, it's just overwhelming. And now as a union organizer, I'm explicitly excluded from the public service loan forgiveness program.
Like, holy cow, 20 grand. That, you know, maybe you weren't going to vote in November and suddenly you just got 20 grand. And, you know, if you can, you know, get off the bong for a minute and head down to the voting station or just send in your mail-in ballot that the Democrats have helpfully sent you, it could drive up turnout, particularly among young people.
My student loan payments every month are double my rent.
How much
About $1,100.
You pay $1,100 every month for student debt.
And I refinanced, yeah.
What does that mean in terms of your financial situation in your life?
I'm working 2 jobs now, and that's going to be my future for a while.
So that's just these two parties fucking. I don't understand Ted Cruz, or the Republicans.
So here,
go ahead.
I think that was stupid of Ted Cruz, but I do. There is a point that he does have. Is I believe Joe Biden doesn't intend to give everybody the $20,000.
I agree.
He's saying it to drum up voting.
I agree with you, bro. Because he hasn't signed it yet. He could just do it. He hasn't done it. He's waiting. He's waiting until the Supreme Court tries to block him.
He doesn't have the authority to do that. That's like the legislature has to pass that stuff. I mean, unless he's been granted control over some funds where he can release it or something like that. But
apparently, executive order because it's a federal matter and he has control over federal funds.
Okay, maybe I don't know. And then,
but he hasn't though. That's the point. That's the point is that he hasn't done it. Usually, we'd be hearing about something he's already done. If he signed an executive order, the media would be reporting on it. He's been talking about this whole student debt cancellation plan that he's got the power to do. They wanted to get rid of all of the debt. He hasn't. He wants to do 10,000. He's just lying. He's a liar, and he's just lying. He's waiting until the Supreme Court. I believe, honestly, Dylan, I believe him and the Supreme Court are working in tandem. They worked in tandem for Roe v. Wade, and they're working in tandem now. I believe Joe Biden's a right winger, and I don't understand why all these right wingers don't like Joe Biden. Maybe it's because he hurt their guy, and they're very loyal to the father figure. But
well, I mean, he's a
Joe Biden is
again. Are we talking left, right, or are we talking up, down?
I'm talking about how Joe Biden's never liked abortion. He's the one who sacked us with our student debt. He created
Joe Biden has never liked or disliked anything political. He says whatever needs to be said in order to benefit himself.
I mean, he wrote a crime bill. You don't think that was personal? I think it was personal. No. Really?
I mean, look at what people are digging up out of Hunter Biden's laptop. This guy is a mafioso, Joe Biden. Right?
He's the big guy. He's the big guy.
Yeah. But another thing I want to emphasize, the both sides were right in that, right? Is there are people who get really crappy degrees and rack up a bunch of debt. And Ted Cruz emphasized that. And Bernie Sanders was right, where it's like, here's productive people who are getting punished for racking up that debt. Right. I mean, this is this stupid fucking political game where it's like, oh, I only emphasize on this and only emphasize on that. And we're just going to against each other. Right. But I think something that's very, very important to point out is even if it was only $10,000 or $20,000, the debt, the interest on the debt is loaded to the fucking front. So if you've got a 30-year loan, let's say you're $50,000 in student debt, and you got a 30-year loan. In fact, I'm going to pull this up, and instead of making up numbers, I'm going to have specific numbers.
Okay, cool.
Pulling up a mortgage calculator.
Wow. Bum, bum, bum.
Okay, so if we've got $50,000 in student debt, bring it down to 50. She said 6% at 6 or 7. I'm going to leave it at 7 or 6 just for fun. We crank that up to 30 years. Okay, that's a pretty small payment. It's probably not 30 years. Let me put it down to 20. Okay. So if you have a $50,000 debt at 6% interest for 20 years, riddle me this. How much interest will you pay over the life of that loan?
I could calculate it, but I don't want to. Don't make me.
$36,000.
Okay. I knew it was something around those lines. Yeah. On top of that.
And that's not the issue. I mean, it is an issue, but it's not the issue. The issue is the majority of that $36,000 is collected from the payments up front.
Okay.
So at the beginning, as you're paying your loan, bam, make that payment, 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 make that payment. Like 80% of the money is going toward interest. And then you turn around and refinance it, you start that clock over, and then you make that payment, you make that payment, you make that payment, and all that money is going toward interest.
Right. Exactly.
So if you got a $10,000 or $20,000 buy down from that before, if you've got a $50,000 loan and you get a $10,000 buy down, you didn't decrease the loan by 1/5. You probably decreased the loan by 1/3 because you've skipped over so much of the interest that was loaded toward the front of the loan. Right. And this shit, like just basic financial understanding, the American public has no idea how this stuff works. Right. So to put it over to Ted Cruz's side, yeah, people are overloading themselves with this debt. And I'm not just talking about student loans, right? I'm just everything,
right.
Particularly mortgages. They overload themselves with these mortgages, and they don't understand that as they keep refinancing themselves, thinking they're saving themselves money, they are massively, and when I say massive, I'm talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, retacking interest back onto that loan. Right? And then, I mean, at the very least, in your mortgage, it's money that's going into the equity of the property, goes up and down or whatever, but you still have the property and the equity in there. When it goes to the interest, that's just money you're just ripping up and throwing in the air. Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't trust Bernie Sanders or Ted Cruz because they're hyper focusing in on, we have an issue. Well, if I hyper focus in on this side of the issue, that supports my point. If I hyper focus on this side of the issue, it supports the other guy's point. And I fall back to, again, the way that the system is set up is wrong, like the leftists say, or excuse me, like the right says. Pardon me. The way that the system is set up, it gives very, very bad incentives.
Okay, that is what they say. Okay.
And I completely agree with that. And I agree with the left to say this is not fair because, you can talk about incentives, whatever you want. You've put an entire generation of people into debt slavery.
Right.
Something fucked up somewhere. And I think both sides need to happen. You get the debt jubilee and you fix the incentives. If we could do that, we would live in a completely different country. Just completely different country.
I like it. Awesome.
And then, I will say this: there is a growing amount of the right. I don't know if you've found them, and this is the younger right, not the older right, that do agree with student debt forgiveness.
I mean, especially the ones that have student loans.
Well, again, their big thing is a gripe with the boomers because they look at the boomers and they say, you inherited the best economy the face of the planet has ever seen. And then you left us with shit. And then you talk to us like, oh, we're just lazy.
And guys, that was Dylan from IRIDA TV. His computer died. And I think that's a really brilliant place to actually leave. But if you want to catch him, just make sure you go to IRIDA TV. And I'm Tommy Asian Politics. Be free thinking, innovative, and open-minded. Also catch all of my INN fam on Linktree/Indie News Network. You can watch us there. Be free thinking, innovative, and open-minded. Thanks for watching, guys.